The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, its crystal walls glowing with soft blue light. Inside the great meeting hall, creatures from across the galaxy gathered around floating screens that showed different worlds. Had tentacles instead of arms.
Ow!
Others had scales that changed color when they spoke. A few looked almost human, but with too many eyes or strange skin that seemed to shift like liquid metal. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center of the room. His people came from a world where the air was poisoned to most other species, so he wore a special suit that kept him alive. The suit made clicking sounds as he moved, and his voice came out distorted through the speakers. "Today we look at the primitive worlds," he announced to the crowd. "These are the species that barely know how to leave their own planets." The first screen showed a world covered in purple oceans, where fish-like creatures had just learned to make fire. The second displayed a desert planet where rock beings moved so slowly that a single thought took them a full day. The aliens in the meeting hall made sounds that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like grinding metal or whistling wind than Earth. Appeared on the main screen. The blue and green planet spun slowly, looking peaceful and beautiful. White clouds swirled over the continents, and the single moon hung nearby like a gray companion. "Ah, the humans," said Councilmember Thexora. She was tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished stone. Her 6 eyes were arranged in 2, rows across her face, and they all blinked at different times, which made her look constantly surprised. "What do we know about them?" An alien with fur and too many teeth pulled up information on a floating screen. "They still use chemical rockets to reach space. Their most powerful weapons are crude nuclear devices. They fight wars with metal projectiles and explosive chemicals. Their planet is divided into hundreds of small territories that constantly fight each other." The laughter in the room grew louder. Some aliens slapped their appendages together in what might have been applause. Others made sounds like breaking glass or rumbling earthquakes. "They have not even managed to build a single settlement on their moon." Thexara continued, her 6 eyes blinking in patterns that showed her amusement. "Their transmissions are weak and disorganized. Most of their communications are about entertainment or commerce. They appear to spend more time watching fictional stories than planning for the future." "A backwater species," agreed another council member, this one looking like a walking tree with silver bark. "They will probably destroy themselves before they ever become a real threat to anyone." "Should we continue watching them?" asked a creature that seemed to be made of living crystal. "Minimal observation only," Veltar decided. "Perhaps we will check on them again in a few hundred years. By then they may have learned to build proper spacecraft, or they may have blown themselves up. Either way, they are no concern of ours." Council members made sounds of agreement and moved on to discuss other worlds. Earth disappeared from the screen, forgotten and dismissed. But far below the surface of Earth, in a bunker buried deep under the Colorado mountains, Director Kim Han sat in a chair facing dozens of screens. His hair was gray, and his face was marked with lines that showed he had spent many years making difficult decisions. He wore a simple military uniform with no decorations, but everyone in the room treated him with great respect. On one of his screens, he watched the same Galactic Council meeting. He understood every word the aliens spoke, though they had no idea humans could intercept their communications. "They think we are stupid," he said quietly. Lieutenant Park Gina stood beside his chair. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with short black hair and bright, intelligent eyes. Her fingers moved quickly across controls that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. "That is exactly what we want them to think, sir. Report on Phase 1, Heen ordered. "All monitoring stations are now online and functioning perfectly," Park replied. "We have listening posts throughout the solar system disguised as communication satellites. The aliens see them as primitive technology for sending messages between our cities. And the construction projects, proceeding ahead of schedule, we now have 17 major installations throughout the solar system. The aliens believe they are research stations for studying space or mining facilities for gathering resources." Heian nodded slowly, "and they have no idea what we are really building, sir. They see metal and concrete and assume we are just ambitious builders. They do not realize that every structure we place in space is designed for war. On another screen, Heian could see the construction happening around Jupiter. Massive structures grew slowly in the darkness, looking like space stations or factories. But Heian knew the truth. Each one was a weapons platform, designed to destroy ships much more advanced than anything humans were supposed to possess. How long until the Prometheus array is complete, he asked. 18 months, sir. Maybe less if we can speed up the asteroid mining operations. Good. By the time they realize what we have built, it will be too late to stop us. Hyun turned back to watch the alien council members discussing other worlds. They laughed at humanity's weakness, never suspecting that their dismissive attitude was exactly what Earth needed to complete its preparations. The galaxy thought. Humans were primitive and harmless. That was humanity's greatest weapon. 50 years had passed since the Galactic Council had laughed at Earth. The galaxy was no longer a peaceful place. A group called the Hegemony Coalition had grown powerful and mean. They traveled from star to star with huge fleets of warships, forcing other species to surrender or be destroyed. The coalition was like a disease spreading across space. They had conquered 23 different star systems. Entire civilizations had been wiped out or turned into slaves. Even the strongest warrior races had fallen before their advanced weapons and endless fleets. Admiral Zekmoth stood on the bridge of his flagship. It's a massive warship called the Voidrender. He was not human-looking at all. His body was covered in dark, smooth armor that seemed to grow from his skin. His head was shaped like an insect's, with large compound eyes and sharp mandibles that clicked when he spoke. When he was happy or amused, the clicking sound got faster. "Show me the latest reports," he commanded his officers. The bridge around him was dark and cold, lit only by the glow of computer screens and weapon displays. His crew moved quietly, afraid to make mistakes that might anger their commander. They had all seen what happened to officers who disappointed Admiral Zekmoth. A younger officer approached, carrying a datapad. This one looked similar to the Admiral, but smaller, with newer armor that still showed scratches from recent battles. "Sir, we have completed the conquest of the vegan system. The lizard people there surrendered after we destroyed their 3 largest cities. They are now mining rare metals for our war machine." "Good," Zekmoth clicked approvingly. "The crystal beings from Altair 7. Their civilization has been completely absorbed, sir. We have learned to use their crystal technology to make our shields stronger. The few survivors work in our weapon factories." The Admiral moved to a large screen that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the systems under Coalition control. There were so many red dots now that they looked like a spreading infection. "The hive minds of Proxima," he asked. "Destroyed completely, sir. Could not risk letting them share thoughts with each other. A hive mind species cannot be controlled safely." Zekmoth's mandibles clicked rapidly with pleasure, even the warlike Catherine Empire, famous throughout the galaxy for their fighting skills, had lasted only 3 months against the Coalition's superior numbers and technology. "What about that small system, Sol, I think it was called?" The intelligence officer checked his records. "Still completely unimportant, Admiral. Our long-range scanners show they have increased their construction activity, but their technology remains primitive. They appear to be building large structures in space." "What kind of structures?" "Unknown, sir. They are very large, but they do not appear to be weapons. Our analysts believe they might be monuments or temples. Perhaps these humans worship their gods by building giant structures in space, Admiral." Zekmoth's clicking became faster and more amused. "Religious monuments in space? How wonderfully primitive. Let them build their temples and pray to their gods. When we need the resources in their system, we will tear down their monuments and turn them into scrap metal." The other officers on the bridge made sounds that might have been laughter, though they sounded more like grinding metal or breaking glass. But far away, at the very edge of the Sol system, something watched the Coalition's fleets with great interest. In the cold darkness beyond Pluto, hidden among the ice and rock of the Kuiper Belt, a small space station floated invisibly. Commander Li Dong sat in a chair surrounded by screens and instruments. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes, but his back was straight and his hands were steady. He had been watching the galaxy's wars for many years, sending information back to Earth about the Coalition's movements. "Report," he said quietly to his team. Specialist Cho Min looked up from her instruments. She was younger than the commander, maybe 40 years old, with short black hair and a serious expression. "The Coalition has taken 17 new systems. In just the past 2 years, sir, they are moving faster than ever before. Their fleet numbers estimated at over 8,000 warships of various sizes. They have also started building new types of weapons. Our sensors detected energy signatures we have never seen before." Commander Li Dong nodded slowly. Most people would have been frightened by this news, but he seemed almost pleased. "Good," he said. "Which surprised the other people in the station, sir?" asked Cho Min, confused. "The faster they expand, the thinner they spread their forces. They are growing too quickly, taking on too much territory. Soon they will be overextended, with too many planets to control and not enough ships to defend them all." "But sir, they have thousands of warships." We have what they do not expect," Dong interrupted with a small smile. "Is the Saturn Ring project progressing?" Cho Min checked her other screens. "Better than expected, sir. Shipyards are working at full capacity. We now have 47 battle cruisers completed and hidden in the ring debris. The Coalition scanners see them as ice mining operations. And the other projects? Jupiter's moons now house 63 weapons platforms. Mars has 38. The asteroid belt facilities are ahead of schedule. All of them appear to be mining operations or research stations to outside observers." Commander Dong turned back to his screens, watching the Coalition's fleets as they moved through space. Sharks hunting for prey. They saw exactly what humanity wanted them to see: a primitive species, building simple structures in space for unknown purposes. They had no idea they were looking at the largest military construction project in galactic history. The darkness of space suddenly filled with light as 50 enormous warships appeared near the edge of the solar system. They had traveled faster than light to reach this place, and now they hung in space like giant metal predators. Each ship was the size of a small city, covered in weapons and armor that gleamed under the distant light of the sun. Admiral Kexaval stood on the bridge of the largest ship, watching Earth through the main viewing screen. He was tall and broad, with thick gray skin that looked like stone. His forearms moved independently as he gave orders, and his voice was so deep it made the metal floors vibrate. "Begin the standard procedure," he commanded his crew, a communications officer, smaller than the admiral, but still twice the size of a human, activated the transmission equipment. The message that went out was the same one the Coalition had sent to hundreds of worlds before this one. Primitive inhabitants of the third planet. Admiral Kexavel's voice boomed across every radio frequency that humans used. "You will surrender, unconditionally, and submit to hegemony rule. You have one solar rotation to comply, or we will demonstrate the futility of resistance." The Admiral expected immediate panic. Most primitive species began broadcasting desperate pleas for mercy within minutes of receiving the ultimatum. Some tried to negotiate. Others begged for more time. A few attempted to surrender immediately, hoping to avoid destruction. But from Earth came only silence. The minutes ticked by. 1 hour, 2 hours. Still nothing. "Are our communications working correctly?" asked the Admiral. "Yes, sir," replied the communications officer, checking his instruments. "All systems are functioning perfectly. The primitives are receiving our transmission. Perhaps they do not understand our language?" suggested another officer. Admiral Kexaval made a sound like rocks grinding together, which was how his species laughed. "They understand. They're broadcasting in 17 different languages, including their own primitive speech. They are simply too frightened to respond." More hours passed. The Admiral grew impatient. He had conquered 47 different worlds, and none had ever remained silent this long. Usually, the sight of the Coalition fleet was enough to make any species surrender immediately, They are paralyzed with terror, he decided. Very well. We will give them a demonstration of our power. Let's target their largest natural satellite and prepare to fire a warning shot. The 50 warships moved toward Earth's moon like a pack of wolves approaching their prey. Their weapon systems began to charge, creating an electric feeling in the space around them. Energy readings climbed as the most powerful weapons in the galaxy prepared to fire. But as they got closer to the moon, something strange happened. The mining equipment that their scouts had reported seeing on the lunar surface began to move. What had looked like simple machinery and construction materials started to shift and change, deep beneath the moon's surface. In a command center that the Coalition had never detected, General Song Hana watched their approach through sensors that were far more advanced than anything the aliens expected humans to possess. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and calm, intelligent eyes. She had spent 30 years preparing for this moment, and now that it had arrived, she felt perfectly ready. "Report," she said quietly. Major Young Tae, a younger man with the quick movements of someone who had trained for combat his entire life, checked his instruments. "All defensive platforms are online and ready. General, the masking fields have been disengaged. Weapon systems are fully charged, and the fleet, 50 warships, just as our deep space monitoring predicted. They are moving into attack formation around the moon." General Song looked at the screens showing the Coalition ships. They were impressive and frightening, but she had been studying their technology for decades. She knew their strengths and weaknesses better than they did. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. The transmission reached the Coalition fleet seconds later. Human woman's voice, speaking clearly and without fear. "This is your only warning. Withdraw immediately. On the flagship bridge, Admiral." Keksavel's forearms gestured in patterns that showed his amusement. "A single primitive female threatens the Third Fleet." How entertaining. He turned to his weapons officer. "Destroy whatever facility that transmission came from. Show these creatures the price of defiance." The Coalition's plasma cannons fired in unison. Beams of superheated energy that could melt through solid rock streaked toward the moon's surface, aimed at what the aliens thought was a simple communication device. But the beams never reached their target. The moon's surface suddenly erupted with defensive fire. What had appeared to be mining equipment revealed itself as hundreds of weapon platforms, each one more advanced than anything in the Coalition's arsenal. Particle beams that bent space itself. Quantum torpedoes that could punch through any known armor. And energy shields that could stop a star's explosion. All this emerged from what the aliens had dismissed as primitive construction. Admiral Keksaval stared in shock as his instrument showed readings that should have been impossible. The energy signatures coming from the moon were off every scale. This primitive species somehow possessed technology that surpassed the Coalition's finest. "Weapons, shields up," he shouted, but it was too late. The human weapons tore through the Coalition ships like they were made of paper. Advanced armor that had protected these vessels through dozens of battles crumpled like thin metal. Shields that could withstand the explosion of small stars collapsed in seconds. One by one, the 50 warships of the Third Fleet were destroyed. Admiral Keksavel's flagship lasted the longest. But even it could not survive the devastating firepower that humanity had hidden on their moon. His last transmission was barely understandable. Impossible. How did they... ... The readings are off the scale. They're not primitive. There, then silence returned to space around Earth's moon, broken only by the slow drift of debris. That had once been the Coalition's Third Fleet. The news of the Third Fleet's destruction traveled across the galaxy faster than light itself. In the Coalition's main headquarters, a massive space station hidden in the center of a dead star system. Emergency alarms had been ringing for hours. Supreme Admiral Velcros paced back and forth in the war room, his heavy footsteps echoing off the metal walls. He was the largest and most fearsome of his species, covered in thick armor that had been welded directly to his body over decades of warfare. Scars crossed his face where enemy weapons had failed to kill him, and his eyes glowed red with anger. 50 ships, he growled, his voice making the other officers in the room step back. 50 of our finest warships, destroyed by primitives who barely know how to leave their own planet? Around the table sat the Coalition's highest-ranking military leaders. They had conquered dozens of civilizations together, but none of them had ever seen their Supreme Admiral this angry before. Perhaps it was not really the humans, suggested one brave officer. Maybe another advanced species has moved into that system and was using it as a trap. Velcros turned his glowing red eyes toward the speaker. Are you saying our intelligence reports were wrong for over 70 years? The officer quickly looked down at his hands. Several other officers who had been responsible for gathering information about Earth had already been executed for their failures. Fleet Admiral Nextira, the only officer in the room who was not afraid of Velcros, stood up slowly. Tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished metal, and 4 arms that moved independently. Her species was known for their logical thinking and careful analysis. Supreme Admiral, she said carefully, our long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures throughout the entire Sol system during the battle. This was not a lucky accident or a hidden weapons cache. Humans had built a coordinated defense network that covers their entire solar system. Impossible. Velcro slammed his fist on the table, making the metal surface crack. A species that uses chemical rockets cannot suddenly develop technology superior to ours. I have been conquering worlds since before these primitives learned to make fire. Yet the evidence is clear, Nexthera continued calmly. The energy readings from their weapons were off our scales. They possessed technology that we did not know existed. Velcros was quiet for a long moment, his red eyes staring at the holographic display showing the Sol system. Finally, he spoke, in a voice that was quieter, but much more dangerous. Then we will show them the true power of the Hegemony Coalition. Assemble the Grand Armada. Every ship we have, every weapon, every soldier. 1,000 warships, our planet-killer devices, our most experienced commanders. We will turn their entire system into ash and scatter it across space as a warning to any other species that thinks it can resist us. The officers around the table looked at each other with surprise. The Grand Armada had never been assembled before. It was the Coalition's ultimate weapon, saved for only the greatest threats. Sir, asked one officer carefully, are you certain? We need that much firepower for one primitive system. Velcro's laugh was like the sound of metal being torn apart. I will not underestimate them again. If they have somehow developed advanced weapons, then we will respond with overwhelming force. When we are finished, there will be nothing left of their system but dust and radiation. For weeks, ships from across the Coalition's territory converged. On a single assembly point, dreadnoughts the size of mountains, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. Carrier ships that housed thousands of fighter craft. Mobile space stations bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. Planet-killer devices that had reduced entire worlds to glowing rubble. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Over 1,000 ships, carrying millions of soldiers, and enough firepower to conquer half the galaxy. When the Grand Armada arrived at the Sol system, their sensors immediately began detecting things that made no sense according to their intelligence. Reports. Fleet Admiral Nexthera studied the displays with growing amazement. Every asteroid in the belt is showing artificial construction. Those are not mining operations, they are weapon platforms. And Jupiter's moons, covered with defensive installations. The energy readings suggest they have been fortified for decades. What about those ring structures around the gas giant? The sensor officer checked his instruments twice before answering. Admiral, those are not natural rings. They appear to be shipyards, massive construction facilities. They are producing vessels with energy signatures that match our own dreadnoughts. Admiral Nexthera felt something she had not experienced in centuries of warfare. Genuine surprise. How many ships? Sensors detect over 400 capital vessels throughout the system, all powered and ready for combat. Meanwhile, in Earth's orbital command station, a massive structure hidden behind one of the larger asteroids. Fleet Admiral Kong Su watched the approaching Coalition armada without fear. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes, someone who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Report from all stations, he said quietly. Captain Bay's son. a younger woman with the quick movements of a career military officer, checked her displays. All defensive platforms are online and ready. The outer perimeter defense grid is fully operational. Our inter-system fleets are moving to attack positions. And our little surprise? Kong asked with a small smile. Jupiter fleet is ready for deployment. 150 capital ships, fully armed and crewed. The Coalition's sensors still read them as research facilities and mining operations. Kong nodded with satisfaction. For 70 years, humanity had carefully maintained the illusion of being primitive. Every report the aliens had received, every assessment of human technology, every dismissive comment about Earth's capabilities had been exactly what humanity wanted them to believe. The Coalition had seen crude construction projects and assumed they were simple engineering. They had detected mining operations and never realized they were looking at weapons manufacturing. It observed research stations and shipyards and dismissed them as the primitive attempts of a backward species to explore space. They had never realized they were watching the construction of the most advanced military network in galactic history. Open a communication channel to all Coalition vessels, Kong ordered. His message reached every ship in the Grand Armada. You came here expecting to find primitives? You were wrong. The moment of truth arrived, like lightning splitting the darkness. The hegemony's Grand Armada hung in space near Earth, 1,000 warships arranged in perfect battle formation. They had come to destroy what they thought was a primitive world. But suddenly everything changed. The asteroids that floated throughout the solar system began to move and transform. What the Coalition had believed were simple mining operations revealed themselves as massive weapon platforms bristling with cannons and energy projectors. Jupiter's moons opened like giant metal flowers. From inside them came sleek warships that moved through space like hunting wolves. Supreme. Admiral Velcro stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at his tactical displays in growing horror. The numbers on his screens kept climbing as more and more human ships appeared from their hiding places. How many ships do they have? He demanded, his voice shaking for the first time in decades of warfare. His tactical officer, a younger alien, with trembling hands, checked the readings 3 times before answering. Sensors detect over 400 capital vessels. Admiral, energy signatures suggest their technology is equal to or superior to our own. That's impossible, Velcro's roared. They barely know how to leave their own planet. No. But the evidence was burning across space right in front of him. Humanity's ships moved in perfect coordination, like they had been practicing this battle for years. Their weapons cut through Coalition shields like they were made of paper instead of advanced energy barriers that had protected. These same ships threw hundreds of battles. These were not the crude chemical rockets and primitive nuclear weapons that Coalition intelligence had reported. These were weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves, wielded by a species that had spent decades pretending to be harmless while building the most advanced military in galactic history. On Earth's surface, in cities around the world, people gathered around public viewing screens and watched their planet's sky fill with fire. But it was not the fire of destruction that they had feared for so long. It was the fire of victory. Coalition warships exploded in brilliant displays of light as humanity's hidden fleets tore them apart with weapons the aliens had never imagined possible. Children, who had grown up hearing stories about the terrible alien invaders who might someday come to destroy Earth now, watched those same invaders being defeated by ships their own people had built in secret, high above Mars. Commander Rojin led his squadron of defense ships against a group of Coalition dreadnoughts. He was a veteran pilot who had trained for this moment his entire adult life, and now he felt grim satisfaction as his quantum torpedoes found their marks. Target the command ship, he ordered his weapons officer over the communication system. Let's end this. The Coalition's flagship, a massive vessel called the Void Render, had been the pride of their fleet. It was the size of a small city and carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. But when the human weapons struck it, the great ship died in a cascade of secondary explosions that lit up half the solar system. Explosions were so bright they could be seen from Earth without telescopes. With the destruction of their flagship, the myth of hegemony invincibility died as well. The coalition had built their empire on fear and the belief that their technology was superior to all others. But now their most advanced ships were being destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive savages. The battle that followed was not really a battle at all. It was a slaughter. Humanity had studied coalition technology for decades, learning every weakness and preparing countermeasures for every weapon. The aliens had come expecting to fight primitives with crude weapons. But instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that knew them better than they knew themselves. Within 6 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history had been reduced to scattered debris floating in space and a handful of fleeing survivors. Less than 50 ships escaped the Sol system, carrying with them a message that would change galactic politics forever. Humanity was not weak, and Earth was no longer a world that could be ignored or conquered. In the aftermath, as human cleanup, crews moved through space collecting the wreckage of alien ships. Fleet Admiral Kong Su stood in the command center and activated the quantum communication system. On screens around him appeared the faces of the Galactic Council members. The same aliens who had mocked humanity decades earlier. Now they watched in stunned silence, their various eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "You made an error in judgment," Kong said simply, his voice calm and professional. "You assumed that silence meant weakness. You mistook patience for primitiveness. You saw construction projects and thought they were crude expansion, never realizing we were turning our entire solar system into a fortress." Council member Thexara, the same alien who had laughed at Earth so many years ago, managed to speak through her shock. Her 6 eyes blinked rapidly as she asked, "How? On how long have you been preparing for this?" "Since the day we learned we weren't alone in the universe," Kong replied. "We are a patient species. We watched, we learned, and we prepared. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength, so we became strong while letting you believe we were weak." The silence that followed his words stretched across light years of space, broken only by the soft hum of quantum transmitters carrying humanity's message to every corner of the galaxy. The message was simple but clear. Earth was no longer the quiet world that could be ignored. The sky had burned with the wreckage of alien ships. From those flames arose a species that would never again be underestimated. Humanity had revealed its true nature to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never be the same.